We just had a lot of people join the webinar. I just wanted to say good evening. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started shortly after 7, just to let people filter in. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give it till 7:02 just to let some people come in if they're looking on Facebook or the meeting agendas, and then we'll get started. All right, thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight for our Killam School and Reading Center for Active Living Joint Community Forum webinar. So before we begin, I'm just going to go over some ground rules / housekeeping for the webinar. Then I'll pass it over to our town manager, Matt Cornelis. So it's just some webinar introductions. This webinar is being recorded and broadcasted to RCTV. This recording will be up on our town website tomorrow morning when I get in. Due to this webinar being a Zoom only, the panelists will be able to unmute themselves and talk during the presentations. If you have any questions about either of these projects, feel free to use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I put this picture here so you guys can see sort of what it looks like. You can type your question and one of our panelists will either type out the answer or at the end, we'll just sort of answer it live when we get to the Q&A portion. If we get to the end and you don't want to type out your question, raise your hand. I can see the attendee list. I'll unmute you. I'll prompt you to give your question. That's all I have. I'm going to pass it over to Matt for introductions.
Okay, thank you, Josh, and thank you for introducing the webinar for tonight. I hope everybody could hear me. If not, let me know. One housekeeping bit of business we do before all these meetings is to ask if boards need to call themselves to order. I know there were several boards posted for tonight, so I don't know if any boards can call themselves to order virtually here, but I'll offer if they can. So.
Hey, Matt, I think if the board members want to raise their hand, I can allow them to talk, to just say here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can, if there's a quorum for the select board, we can start with the select board. Any members can raise their hand.
Hi, I'm here, Karen Rose Gillis, Select Board. I don't know if anyone else is.
Karen Herrick, Select Board.
Chris Haley, Select.
Okay. So the select board is called to order. Anybody here from the finance committee, if you could raise your hand?
I don't think you have quorum anywhere else, Matt. I just see
Okay.
2 or 3 from the other boards.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't seem like we have quorums for other boards, but the select board is called to order tonight. So thank you for everybody for coming. Virtually, our first live appearance was on April 2nd, as you can see on the screen. That was at the PAC, and we promised a virtual meeting as well, and that's happening tonight via Zoom. There's also a QR code, if maybe Josh, if you can flip to the next screen. If you want more information regarding these projects, capital projects that we're working on, you can use the QR code. There's information on the website. We have a handout for tonight that we used a few weeks ago. So please scan that QR code and you'll be right in business. So we're here tonight to share some information about 2 very important town projects. We hope you've heard something about them by now. The Killam School and the Senior Center / Recalc projects. Those are our 2 top priorities in town right now. It's going to be a very busy spring, not only dealing with town meeting, but with dealing with these projects in general. Both projects have been in the works for several years. I've been working here in Reading for 10 years now, and there's been serious talk of both projects since even before I got here. And now we're at a point where action is going to be taken. So for both projects, we've assembled a group of talented people, professionals, including town staff, residents, volunteers, and consultants. And that's mainly who you'll hear from tonight on the webinar. And just to give you a little bit of what's going to be happening next in town regarding these projects, this is all in preparation for a special town meeting that'll take place on May 1st, where both projects will be discussed and voted on by town meeting. Hopefully there's some town meeting members here tonight on the webinar, so this will be a little preview of town meeting for you, of special town meeting, and that was the hope. And also all community members are also welcome. So tonight we plan on going through both presentations. They'll run about 20 minutes apiece, and then we'll have plenty of time for your questions at the end. So please, if you don't mind, hold your questions till the end, even written questions, whatever, to the end of both presentations. And that way we'll have time to get through all the information first and have plenty of time for your questions and provide you with answers. And that's really the most important part of the meeting, is hearing from you and hearing what your concerns might be and what your questions are, and getting you the answers you need prior to town meeting. So here in Reading, we're fortunate to have what's called a permanent building committee. And this is made up of primarily building professionals that are also residents and volunteers in the community. And they've been involved in both projects, and Pat Tompkins is the chair of that permanent building committee. So he'll start by sharing some important information regarding the committee's role in these projects, and then we'll get into the projects themselves. So I'd like to introduce Pat Tompkins at this time.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Pat Tompkins. I'm the chair of the Permanent Building Committee. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about who we are, what our role is in these projects, why we believe it's time for the community to reinvest in our infrastructure, and most importantly, why we fully support both of these projects. So the Permanent Building Committee, next slide, please. So we're an appointed committee that was formed back in 2015, largely to administer large-scale building projects like the ones we're going to talk about tonight, partially in hopes of avoiding some of the challenges that we've faced on projects like this in the past. In addition to administering building projects, we work closely with the facilities department, doing an assessment and inventory of the town buildings. So as a group, we're very familiar with the various buildings in town. The next slide, please. So as you can see from the list of members, I'm not going to go through, give you the bio of each individual member, but as you can see, it's a good diverse group of design and construction professionals. We've got a structural engineer, a couple of mechanical engineers, an architect, some contractors, and we've even got a construction attorney in the group. It's a good group of professionals. Whenever we tackle a topic, we always come at it from different viewpoints. And from my perspective, while we never start off discussing a topic in agreement, in fact, we pretty much never agree on anything as a group. We're always able to work together, communicate with each other, see each other's point of view, and eventually there's someone in the group that has a specific expertise on whatever decision or action item we're trying to take. And we're always able to come to consensus as a group. So how do we fit into the specific projects? Go to the next slide, please. In accordance with the bylaws, when we have a large-scale building project like this, we create project-specific building committees where we take the permanent building committee members and we add members from other boards and committees that are more familiar with the end use of the building, such as adding school committee reps, members of FinCom, members of the select board, as well as council on aging. In addition to the building committee, there's a lot of talent on the town staff from the facilities department and throughout the town. We're very fortunate to have a really good staff, and they've been great working on these projects so far, and they're going to continue. Also, overseeing and helping to manage the project, so really doing the lion's share of the work. On each project, we have an owner's project manager and an architect. On the Killam School project, it's Colliers is our OPM and LBA is our architect. On the Recal project, Turner Townsend Harry is our OPM and BH+A is our architect. All four of those consultants have been great partners to the town through the process. They're going to continue to be, and they've really done a great job so far. And as a group, between the consultants, the town staff, the permanent building committee, and the building committees, we're going to have a lot of eyes on these projects to make sure they get constructed properly. Next slide, please. So one big question on everyone's mind, why two projects and why now? As a building committee, next slide, please. When we look at the town projects, the buildings in town, we always break them into two groups. We've got the school buildings on one side and all the municipal buildings on the other side, the town hall, fire station, police station, and obviously the senior center. Now, these buildings are constructed with an expected lifespan of call it 50 years. Now, we have a great facilities department and we tend to stretch out that lifespan, but you can pretty much count on needing to replace or do a major renovation on every building project after 50 years. So with 8 school buildings and 7 municipal buildings, that would require replacing a building every 6 years on the school side and every 7 years on the municipal side. Next slide, please. And as you can see from this slide, the last school project that we did was the renovation of the high school that was completed 19 years ago. And the most recent municipal project was the library renovation, completed 10 years ago. The last actual new building is in town is the Wood End Elementary School, which is, I think, we all consider that a new building. I think it's 21 years old at this point. So next slide, please. Another way that we look at the buildings in town is sort of is how old they are and what the average life of the buildings are. And when we think of the age of a building, we look at the building, its age since the last major renovation. For example, the Barros Elementary School was built in 1963, but it underwent a significant renovation in 2005. So we look at that as a 20-year-old building. And using that criteria, our school buildings on average are 29 years old. Move to the next slide. Our municipal buildings on average are 35 years old. So whether we look at periodic replacement or just the average age of the buildings, as a committee, it became very clear to us that we believe we need to reinvest in our facilities, and we need to do it basically on both sides, both on the school side and on the municipal building side. From our perspective, sort of the do nothing option, we don't believe that is an option. If you do nothing and you just fast forward just a mere 5 years, you'd be looking at a host of school buildings, an average age of 34 years, and your municipal buildings with an average age of 40 years old, with a 50-year lifespan. And what will happen is we'll start stacking up multiple projects and pretty much kick the can down the road for future generations to have to pay for it, which we don't think is who we want to be as a community. So move to the next slide, please. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to reaffirm, the Permanent Building Committee, we fully support both of these projects. And we wanted to also, our goals and really our commitments on these projects is to make sure that they're built, we build sustainable buildings at the highest quality, and we build them on time and under budget. And one of the things the big thing I want to reiterate, that as a committee, we're committed to ensuring that the projects are completed on budget. We are confident in the budgets that we have for these projects now. They contain contingencies which we believe are appropriate. And the contingencies are for in the event we have, varying market conditions. And if we have favorable market conditions and we're able to see savings on these projects, our intent is to make sure that money goes back to the town. And there won't be an attitude of, if something comes in under budget and we have extra funds, we spend it because we have it. And also, if we have unfavorable conditions and we start to bump up against potential cost overruns, we are going to value engineer and rescope these projects to make sure they stay on budget. And we will be doing estimates along the way as we go through design. So I just want to reiterate that we do not intend to come back to town meeting looking for more funds on these projects. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think, the Killam team, who's going to give us more information on that project. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. Tom Milcheski, I'm the superintendent of schools, and excited to provide an overview of the Killam School Building Project. Next slide, please. So in tonight's presentation, 5 parts of the presentation. 1, what's the need for a new school? And then the benefit for a couple of different groups in our community. Talk a little bit what the MSBA process is, how much the project will cost, and then also what happens if the vote does not pass. Next slide, please. So diving in, first, why the need for a new school? And on the next slide, you'll see that we bucket this into 2 categories. 1, physical plant deficiencies, and also programmatic needs. Before we talk about each of those in a little bit more detail, I'd like to make a couple of quick points. 1, as Pat shared, the construction of Killam Elementary was completed in 1969 with no major renovation since. Would also like to say, as part of the project, the process with MSBA, we did have to explore the potential of a renovation instead of a rebuild. And through that process, we have found that coming up just to code compliance for the building would cost at least $61 million. Next slide, please. We're going to speak now a little bit more detail about the physical deficiencies and also the programmatic. So Kevin Kabuzzi is going to speak quickly on the physical plan.
Good evening, everyone. Kevin Kabuzzi, Assistant Facilities Director for the town of Reading. As Dr. Milashevsky had explained, there are physical plant issues there. We just feel like the building is at the end of its useful life. We've got lead in the water over there. We're not in compliance with ADA. There's the electrical system there is maxed out. We can't add much more to it at all. There's no fire suppression system in the building. We have a fully compliant and updated fire alarm, but no sprinklers in the building. Probably 95% of the doors and windows are overdue for replacement. We've got some water infiltration in a couple areas of the building. There's access to rooms, certain rooms through other classrooms, so it's disruptive to the learning environment. And also the sight lines in the building are poor, which is not conducive to a safe school.
The next slide, we'll jump a little. Those are a couple of images showing some of the deficiencies. And on the next slide, in terms of the programmatic needs, the building does not meet the needs of our current learners. There's a lack of appropriate spaces for some of our students with disabilities, some are MLL learners, and also for small group support. Our library and media center, which is the hub of the building, is also used as a sort of a corridor for all of our classes to move throughout, which, as you can imagine, is not ideal or conducive for learning. The facilities team, in addition to maintaining the building really well, they've been really creative with trying to make spaces into the needs that we have in terms of using, hallways, stage areas for storage, converting closets into working spaces or office spaces. And in addition to that, also we have, which is a major challenge for us just in the day and age we're in, limited data connections in classrooms, which limits our ability to move forward in the ways we need to with instructional technology. Again, that's just a high-level overview of some of both the programmatic deficiencies and also the physical plant needs. Next slide, please. So I think the obvious benefit is for the Killam School community. And on the next slide, you'll see that in addition to benefiting just the students at Killam, there are also other groups within the Reading Public Schools that would benefit from a new build. First and foremost, on the next slide, the Killam community. I don't think our team needs to spend a ton of time outlining the benefit that a state-of-the-art school would have on the day-to-day experience for our Killam students or on outcomes for our students. But we did want to take a couple of minutes to articulate some of those other groups that would really benefit that may not be as obvious outside of just the Killam students themselves. So you can go forward 2 slides. So the next, one of the biggest groups that would benefit from the new building is our RISE preschool students. So as the community may know, right now our RISE program has 10 classrooms that are split across 3 different sites, which you can imagine trying to run a school or a program, the challenges of doing that across multiple sites. This project would put all of our RISE classrooms under one roof, 12 classrooms under one roof, and we think would really allow us to better serve and provide a better program for our youngest learners. It's important for me at this point to also emphasize to the community that investing in our youngest learners is one of the best investments that we can make in our community, particularly some of our most vulnerable youth and some of our younger students with disabilities. Investing early. This is not I've heard, sort of the phrase daycare. This is investing in our youngest learners, which is, one could argue, the most important and formative years of their educational experience. So we're really excited about the possibility of having RISE under one roof. And furthermore, we're really excited that MSBA will be participating in reimbursement of the RISE classrooms. As the community may know, MSBA does not traditionally participate in reimbursement for pre-K programs, but given that these also support students with disabilities, and given the way that the original statement of interest was written, MSBA agreed to participate, which is a huge benefit to our community, given the amount of reimbursement that would mean as part of the project. Next slide. Another group that would also, you go forward one more, another group that would also benefit is just sort of the general district population. If you look at some of the demographic studies that have been put forward by the district of the last couple of years, you'll see that we are expecting a slight enrollment increase starting the 26-27 school year. That would also then continue on for the next up until 2030. For us to be able to absorb what we see as a potential increase in student enrollment, it is important that we are, prepared and have the space to be able to do that. So opening up a couple of classrooms through consolidating RISE under one roof would allow us to prepare for that increase without having to do any other builds or expansions that would be, costly and also could impact the day-to-day experience of our students. Next slide, please. And then the last group that we think is really important to explain some of the benefits would be our high school students. For those who have been following along with what's been happening at our high school, the high school is undergoing a really exciting transformation in terms of providing more innovative hands-on learning opportunities for our students. Most of that coming through our new 5 innovation pathways: computer science, engineering, digital media, clean energy, healthcare, and social assistance. This opening up the basement of RISE, the basement of the high school, which currently houses most of our RISE program, would allow us to have more hands-on vocational lab spaces for a lot of our programming. A couple examples here include expanding our robotics and computer science lab, and also an engineering lab, which would merge CAD with some traditional hands-on construction. We think this would take some of our programming at the high school and opportunities to the next level. And this aligns to many of the grants that we've recently received to provide more innovative and hands-on learning opportunities for our students. So again, we want the community, as we think about the building, is a building that will not just benefit the students who are the K-5 Killam students, but also has a significant benefit for the rest of our Reading Public School community. So I'm going to turn it over now to Sean Brandt, who's going to speak about the site plan.
Thanks, Tom. So my name's Sean Brandt. I'm a member of the school committee and also a member of the Killam School Building Committee. We've talked a lot about the need to replace Killam, so I want to shift gears for a few minutes and talk about what it is that we actually intend to build if this project is funded. So what you're looking at here on the screen is the intended site plan for the school once construction is complete. And just to orient you a bit, on the right-hand or east side of the plot, you'll see Haverhill Street, and then you've got Charles running diagonally down the left or west side of the site. The new building would actually be constructed on that east end of the site where the current field and playground space is located. You can actually see, if you look closely, the footprint of the existing building is depicted here with the dotted gray outline that sort of overlaps the parking lot and the field spaces. The new site would feature a dramatically improved parking and drop-off situation, which would help keep traffic off of Charles Street. We also have room on the site, as you can see here, to build playground spaces, at multiple levels, to have a large multi-purpose field that would be able to host soccer and other sports and activities, but also a baseball diamond so that we could continue hosting t-ball and the younger girls softball leagues as the Killam field does today. You could go to the next page, please. This is a rendering of how the building would look from a bit of an aerial view on the Charles Street side. And one thing I'll note as we go through some more renderings is that what they're really intended to do is to give you a sense of how the building and the other facilities would sit on the site and how we intend to use the space. I wouldn't, you shouldn't consider design decisions like the materials you see here on the exterior of the building as final. Those decisions will come as part of the detailed design process that comes next. If we page forward one more. This is a rendering of the sort of plaza area that would sit between the parking lot and the entrance to the building. Provides plenty of room for kids to stay sort of safely away from the traffic flow during drop off and pickup. Really kind of welcoming place to enter into the building. We go to the next slide. We zoom out a bit to Charles Street, and you can see that the building is significantly more set back from Charles Street than it is today. Lots of green space in between the building and the street. The flip side of that, if we page forward, is that the placement of the new building is obviously much closer to Haverhill Street, which you can see here. What I'd say is that the designers have been really thoughtful to make sure that we don't have a layout that results in sort of a flat 3-story face up against Haverhill Street, which would feel really imposing on the neighbors there on Haverhill. So you'll see from the design here, we've got places where the building sticks out a bit more, others where maybe it's recessed a bit further from the street. Sort of creates a sense of dynamics that help the building blend in a bit better, as does the portion at the end on the right there, which is only a 2-story element of the building. Page forward, we've got an interior rendering, and this really illustrates one of the key design elements that I think we and the educators at Killam who've been involved in this are really excited about, which is that we've actually pulled some of each classroom sort of designated space outside of the core classroom area, but with plenty of glass in between so that staff can effectively supervise across both spaces. And the idea here is that it's a design that creates a lot of flexibility for teachers to create small group environments for students that may need a little bit of extra support, or maybe they've got a group that's a bit more accelerated and is working on something different than the rest of the class. In instances where we may have a class that has a para-educator or perhaps a tutor or a reading specialist working with the class, it just provides a discrete instructional space to support those kinds of efforts as well. Page forward. This is how a cafetorium might look. Cafetorium is a word that I didn't know until we started this process, but it's the obviously the amalgamation of cafeteria and auditorium. But this one, combines a modern cafeteria and kitchen space with a fully accessible stage space, which something that you'll see in many of our schools. And then the last bit that I'll share about the building itself, or the project itself, is the floor plan views. So Dr. Milichewski highlighted the expansion and consolidation of our RISE pre-K program. And in the lower portion of the first floor view there on the left-hand side, you'll see, it's probably hard to make out on the screen, but all the shaded green area there is essentially the dedicated space for the RISE pre-K program. One thing I really like about this layout is that space actually has doors which separate it from the lobby area and the rest of the building, which creates this, really a very much kind of a separate little village for the pre-K program when they want to do that. On the other half of the first floor is space for administration, the music room, the cafetorium, and some of the other sort of, building space or building wide spaces, if you will. On the second and third floors, in the lower portion of each of those, you see that we've created, neighborhoods essentially. And so on the left-hand side of the second floor, you've got the first floor neighborhood, first grade neighborhood with all the first grade classrooms. You've got the kindergarten classrooms there running along the bottom, second grade classrooms along the right, and then a similar layout on the third floor where you have the third, fourth, and fifth grade classrooms in their own little clusters. The gym space that you can see on the second floor at the top there, that's accessible both from within the building, but also from an exterior stairwell, which would help us make it a really valuable asset, not only for the school, but for all kinds of recreational and community activities when the school is closed as well. You can page forward one more. So I want to talk a little bit about the MSBA process here. We've alluded to this several times. So the MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It's a quasi-independent governmental agency, which really was created to sort of improve the way that the state helps fund capital improvement projects, for public schools throughout the Commonwealth. It's funded by a penny of that 6 1/4 penny sales tax that we have. And over the last 20 or so years, the MSBA has provided $16 billion in payments to cities, towns, and regional school districts. This is our opportunity to get some of that money back that we've been contributing as a town, via our own sales taxes. One of the things that the MSBA does beyond the funding piece, though, is that they are very closely involved with us from a guidance perspective to help ensure that we're building a building which is affordable, sort of scaled appropriately, but also that's sustainable and energy efficient so that our operating costs are managed as well as possible going forward. Last thing I'll highlight here, in 2021, when we submitted our statement of interest, which is essentially our application to the MSBA, there were 58 towns or districts that submitted their SOIs. We were one of just 11 that were invited to advance from that process. And so we felt really lucky at the time, and we feel really lucky today to have been selected as part of the MSBA process and be here on the precipice of receiving sort of significant support from the MSBA. A little bit of where we are in the project or in the process from an MSBA perspective. In the second swim lane there, Module 5, funding the project is where we are. So over the last, better part of the last 2 years, we've gone through some of the initial documentation and processes that you have to do with the MSBA. We've done the initial design work, which is called the schematic design, which results in a lot of the site plan and floor layouts and visuals that you've just seen. And we're at the point where both the town and the MSBA are, prepared, assuming the votes go through, to commit to funding this project. From there, we move into the detailed design process, which gives us the construction documents that we need to go out to bid and then begin construction, which would be scheduled to be something that would start in the summer of 2026. Construction, the core portion of construction is expected to last for about 2 years, wrapping up and having the building be occupied beginning in the fall of 28. And then construction would continue for about a year as we decommissioned the old school, and then built some of the additional facilities on the site that would have to wait for the original building to come down. If you could advance to the next page. I think I just covered all the key pieces here, but a visual of the construction timeline, or the project schedule rather. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on these next few pages, but we did want to highlight, to get to this point, we offered a tremendous number of community feedback opportunities and got some really valuable feedback from the community as part of those sessions. So we held educational visioning sessions to sort of understand what the community wanted in this building, the community, meaning both the Killam community, but the Reading community at large. We also held a number of community meetings on a series of particular topics. So the site survey and where the school building would be located was something we certainly engaged with the community on. We had discussions about our traffic study and sort of our expectations for what traffic patterns and flows would look like, which resulted in some pretty substantial improvements, I would say, to the layout of the, sort of the drop-off loop and the parking setup as well. And then we've had a sustainability work group in place, which has helped us land on some really, I think, wise decisions about, HVAC systems and other choices that we'll make, which will again, sort of keep the operating costs of the building managed well as we go forward. Good page forward, just some photos of some of those events. One piece I didn't reference. Members of our team visited several schools, newer schools. I think all these, opened within the last 2 to 2.5 years. But just to get a sense for what some of the modern buildings are doing, and some of the opportunities that were available to us as we think about, modern, useful, flexible spaces in our new building here. Page forward one more. We can skip over this page as well. And then I'm going to hand to Sharon. Sharon's going to talk a little bit about what, many folks want to know, which is the financial elements of the project. Sharon?
Thank you, Sean. My name is Sharon Engstrom. I'm the CFO and town accountant for the town, and we're going to go over the project costs. So the Killam project is going to cost $130,011,783. We are getting an MSBA contribution of $44,182,227, leaving the remaining town share at $85,829,556. So when we got those numbers, we ran them through our bonding agent to get different terms, just to identify a term that made sense for minimizing interest, but also still be in the range of affordable for most households. We're leaning towards a 20-year borrowing for this project, which is an $80.50 impact per 100,000 of assessed value. We did have 3 excluded debts prior. Reading High School and Wood End fell off the tax bill in fiscal 24, but had been there for about 20 years. And those were $27.15 per $100,000 of value that would have fallen off your tax bill in fiscal 25. The Reading Public Library was a 10-year term, and it's going to fall off the tax bill for next year because the last payment is this year. So we'll have no more remaining excluded debt. So it's a good time to think about taking on a project with excluded debt because we've paid everything off. Next slide, please. So the average home in Reading is about $890,000. And so this project would add $716.45 to the average home's tax bill. And that's on top of Prop 2.5. Your bill goes up 2.5%, but excluded debt is on top of that. And that's about $59.70 a month. If you subtract out the most recent debt exclusions falling away, your net impact of debt exclusions is $329.65 because about $386.80 of excluded debt is falling off between this year and next year. And it's likely that in fiscal 26, there'll be very little impact if this project moves forward because we're doing the vote so late in the year. There probably wouldn't be much of a debt payment if I borrowed. It would be maybe interest on a ban. So you're going to see all 3 of those excluded debts fall off of your tax bill, and then this will probably come on, mostly start to see it in fiscal 27. The other thing that's important to note is that we do have a tax impact calculator that we have on our website, a link to it, so you can find out how does this project affect for this project and the recal project, how does this impact my tax bill? If you don't know your assessed value, you could click on find your assessed value here and look up your address, and it will give you the assessed value currently. So that's a good estimator. And then if you put in your home value or you have it feed in, you can select what projects you're looking to determine how much it's going to cost. So you can put both of them, or you do one or the other just to see each one's individual impact. But you can see below it shows you the overall impact depending on what value your house is. It also shows you how much has fallen off your tax bill over the last couple of years in excluded debt. As I said, the high school in Wood End had been there for 20 years. And the library just 10 years. So having no excluded debt on our rolls is a good time to be entertaining some projects to, address our infrastructure here in the town. This next slide is for what if it doesn't pass, and that is Sean.
Thanks, Sharon. Sharon, I always appreciate Sharon is like all about the facts. I want to add 2 editorial comments. One is that, it's not an accident that these projects are, sort of timed for when they are. I think it's a result of really careful planning from lots of people, Sharon, Matt's predecessors, the finance committee, to have these projects come on only as our, our pre-existing debt exclusions are coming off. So, that's a reflection of really good planning, I think, by the town. And the second thing I would say is, Sharon, you sort of alluded to this, but it's important to note that those increases from the 2 projects, we don't go 0 to 60 overnight. It's sort of as the borrowing occurs, you'll start to see that reflected on tax bills. So there's a little bit of a phase in, of the borrowing on the tax bills over the next few years. So if the project fails, so lots of implications, and we just again just want to sort of be clear about what those are. If we were to lose the vote, we would be out of the MSBA process, and the 44 million or so in grants that we're expecting from the MSBA would then be directed to other communities that are participating in the MSBA process. We don't have a path to sort of allocating the students at Killam to other spaces within the district, and so every expectation is that we would have to continue to occupy the building with all of the limitations, that Dr. Milichewski and Kevin highlighted from both a physical and a programmatic perspective. The building will likely get increasingly expensive to maintain and repair, just as the systems age, as we do have to do some of those, replacement projects around doors and windows and things like that. I think Dr. Milichewski alluded to this earlier, but just the projects that we know that we would have to do to address some of those, fundamental plant deficiencies would trigger requirements for us to bring the building fully up to code. So that means addressing fire sprinklers, addressing the ADA issues. We've estimated those costs, and this was also part of the MSBA process, but we've estimated those costs just to bring the building up to code, not to change anything about the footprint or add any space or add any sort of major, programmatic improvements. Those costs would be about $61 million. So a substantial portion of what the town will be on the hook for if we do a new building. If any building upgrades we were to do, we'd have to find temporary learning spaces for some of the students in the building. We'd be able to do some of the upgrades, piecemeal, portions of the building at a time, but you'd have, entire classrooms of students that we had to find different learning spaces for during those upgrades. All of those costs would be borne 100% by the town of Reading. There's no MSBA reimbursement coming for those things. Obviously, we'd lose out on a lot of the programmatic benefits that we're getting for the town, for RISE, and certainly for the Killam community. One of the things we learned during this process as well is that the modern school building that's being built, if you look at our buildings in town, all of our elementary school buildings fall well short of sort of the average square footage per student that's recommended for a modern building. The current Killam footprint is actually about half the size of what the state prescribes as the appropriate square footage. So we continue to have that, the space constraints and everything that comes along with that. We could potentially apply to get into the MSBA process at a later date. We'd certainly reset the clock on all the work. And there's about $2+ million that we've spent to date on all the design work that would not be eligible for reimbursement if we were accepted back into the MSBA process at some point in the future. So all of that would be money that we'd have to spend again, and we wouldn't be able to sort of resubmit for reimbursement. So, significant implications. We just want to be crystal clear on what those are as folks, consider the options in May. So with that, we will close out on Killam. I know folks have been actively using the Q&A. We're going to maybe answer some of those publicly here at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and pass to our friends from the Recal Center.
Thanks, Sean. Good evening, folks. My name is Mark Doxer. I'm going to I'll do the transition here to move over to the Reading Center for Active Living project, which we sometimes call Recal. I am a member of the Permanent Building Committee. I was a member of the Reading Center for Active Living Committee, which was focused on understanding the needs for this, the needs in the community and the needs for taking this forward. I also was a member of the Select Board for the past 6 years, during which time I was a very vocal advocate for this as one of the key needs in the community. Next slide, please. What we'd like to do this evening is I want to talk to you about, number one, why we need the Recal facility. And I want to emphasize it's a need, not a want. We'll talk about the benefits to the community, how the design addresses that, the public input that's been involved with this. We'll talk about project cost, and then we'll talk a little bit about the existing Pleasant Street Center, which is currently serving as the senior center. I think what I'd like to do here is we have a video that we'd like to show you, and I think it'll be a really good transition to give you an overview of what this facility will be like and how it can serve the community. So Josh, if you could put that on now, please.
Have you heard about the new Reading Center for Active Living, or Recal? It's a new community asset which is meant to create a center of activity and connection for our residents. The proposed site is adjacent to the Burbank Ice Arena on Simons Way. Recal is built around its program rooms, thoughtfully crafted to meet the diverse needs of our 60-plus community with dedicated senior hub space, while providing new recreation space and areas dedicated to veterans services. The building opens into a spacious and inviting lobby with information and resources available about programming. It will offer versatile spaces for classes, workshops, and group activities from educational seminars to yoga, all of which will support our 60-plus population for programming, including a lounge and cafe, both perfect for relaxation or impromptu gathering with friends, and an adjacent patio, expanding space into the outdoors. A maker space equipped with tools and materials for crafting, sewing, robotics, and other hands-on projects. A billiards room on the second floor with an adjacent roof deck overlooking the conservation land. A game room and card room for friendly competition and camaraderie. There are multi-use rooms for larger gatherings and events, enabling multi-generational activities, and so much more. A full kitchen, not just for preparing meals, but a center for cooking classes and shared experiences. And finally, the gymnasium and walking track that loops above, supporting the senior community's desire for athletic programming, as well as space for people of all ages and community organizations. The new Recal will replace the current Pleasant Street Center, while also adding new facilities for the whole community, including recreation and veterans services, all of which will support new programming and provide an incredible new asset to the entire community, offering something for everyone.
Thanks, Josh. We can bring us back to the slides here for a moment. And next slide, please. And let's talk a little bit about the need for the facility. Next slide, please. So let me kind of break this into two pieces. I want to talk a little bit about, from the user point of view, what's going on here. And then I'm going to ask Kevin Kabuzzi to talk a little bit about from the facility side. The net here, folks, is that the current center is not able to meet the needs of the 60-plus community, period. There are a lot of issues that we come up with. There aren't enough rooms. The spaces are too small. We have some issues of noxious odors in the room, but we regularly have wait lists for programs. There are more people that want to participate in programs, but we can't accommodate them. And that really kind of highlights this point that the 60-plus community needs more space. Kevin, can I ask you just to chat a little bit about the more the facility side of it, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Kevin Kabuzzi again here, Assistant Facilities Director for the town. The building was built in the late 1800s. It served the town as a police station, a fire station, I believe town hall for a short time, and currently, obviously, the senior center. It saw its last major renovation in 1993 when it became the senior center. And we've pretty much wrung everything out of the systems in that building that we can, particularly the HVAC system, and the sprinkler and fire alarm there. Everything's at the end or exceeded its useful life. We've got some water infiltration in the basement. It's an old stone foundation, so we have issues from time to time there. As Mark noted, there's a lack of space in the building. The approaches to the building are not ADA compliant. There's no bathrooms on the first floor. These are just some of the reasons why it just does not function well for the senior community.
Thanks, Kevin. Next slide, please, Josh. So just by way of quick background, I know Matt alluded to this. This has been a 10-year process. It goes back to consultants we brought in to take a look that made recommendations to us. In 2021, the select board decided to form a committee, the Reading Center for Active Living Committee, to look into the needs of the community, understand how we can best meet those needs. We brought forward a whole series of recommendations. We were able to get funding from the federal ARPA program, and that funding covered a feasibility study, a whole series of stakeholder meetings, and as I'll show you in a minute, some surveys that we did as well. The net from this is that we came back, we looked at a variety of different locations in town. We focused on 3. We focused looking on the existing Pleasant Street Center. Could we do updates to it? We looked over at Oakland Road. We looked over at Simon's Way. The consensus of this recalc committee, the Council on Aging, the Permanent Building Committee, and the Select Board was that Simon's Way was the preferred location, and they all took unanimous votes toward that. Fast forwarding to 2025, we've continued, we've done drawings and costing, and that brings us to where we are now, which is coming to town meeting and then taking it to a community vote. Next slide, please. So the community of age 60 plus is not being served well enough, as I just showed you kind of in the last series of slides. There is a need to do more. There is a need to have more facilities. One of the things that's happening in Reading, but also nationally, is the age 60 plus community is growing. It represents almost 29% of our community today. It's forecast to be at least 30% of our community by 2030 and continuing to grow. The space that we have is very limited, and it's not accessible or inclusive enough to meet the needs that we're talking about. Today, we have all sorts of wait lists. We also don't even have enough office or program space so that there can be private meetings that are held in the current building. Next slide, please. So when we say the age 60 plus community, it's not as if that this is just one large group that all has the same needs. It spans in our community more than 40 years. So we have people 60 and to well over 100 years of age. That lack of space, the lack of flexibility, the lack of recreational opportunities is really holding us back, not letting us serve the community as we need to. Right now, this age 60 to 69 group, so just that younger side of this demographic group, that's 46% of our age 60 plus community. Other locations that have done these CAL concepts, Centers for Active Living, have found that when they put these centers online, they get a drastic increase in participation in this age range. And this is a target that the Council on Aging and other groups around the state and even more broadly have been working really hard. How do we get more of these younger seniors, the age 60 plus group? By the way, I'm a member of that group, to get them more involved in the activities in these centers and to allow for more social activities. Next slide, please. So how can this benefit the community? Next slide, please. The center is focused on the age 60 plus community first and foremost, and it offers something for everyone, as was talked about a little bit in the video, ranging from programs that are intergenerational to services specifically for age 60 plus, to youth programs, to adult programs. It's for the entire community. Next slide, please. So the mission that was defined for the Center of Active Living was to promote health, wellness, and community engagement, particularly for residents 60 and over. The center will replace the Pleasant Street Center in terms of senior center activities and add these new capabilities and programming for the 60 plus community and for the entire community. It's meant to be a welcoming space to support social interactions. You'll have the opportunity for recreational activities, and all ages will be able to do different things. In addition to that, you see on the bottom here, Elder and Human Services, Veteran Services, and Recreation. The opportunity here is to bring those groups together, both in terms of offices, but more importantly, in terms of the services that can be offered. And this is a unique opportunity for us to be able to do that as a community resource. Next slide. We did do a survey as part of that recalc group. We got 1,472 responses. We had 24 questions. I want to highlight to you what you can see here in the light blue. And this really was what was the desire to have an all ages community center. So if you look at the very bottom, you can see 49% kind of the accumulation felt that this was the right thing. The far left 39% would have been a senior center alone. And you can see different ages in the community of those who responded felt very, very strongly that we could have great value in a community center with dedicated space for the age 60+ community. Next slide, please. One of the things that we found was very interesting. So in 2023, the Surgeon General came out with a report that talked about what's going on in terms of loneliness and isolation. Of course, COVID-19 had a big impact on this, but folks, we're having issues with social connection, particularly in the 60+ community. This report highlighted that this can have economic costs to individuals, to community, and society as a whole. One of the things that we wanted to make sure of, also apologies that my clock is going off in the background, was to make sure that we could have a way to generate social connection, not only for individuals, but also the communities that they live in. Next slide, please. One of the things that came out of this report was that lacking the social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day. It's really problematic. And the suggestions were that you put together these pillars for social connection. The number one pillar was to strengthen social infrastructure in local communities by designing a built environment to promote connection. That's exactly what the Recal Center is targeted for. Next slide, please. I mentioned something for everyone. You saw some examples of that in the video. But the structure of this is set up focused on the age 60+ community. A senior hub space, lounge, cafe area, card and game room, all sorts of different activities, including a fitness room, all on the first floor. The programming activities that we would put together allow us to use that space throughout the day for the 60+ community with the focus, but also more broadly after that. For ages 18+, you can have organized enrichment and sports programming. The school community, we think, will benefit from this dramatically also for programs that could run after school through different groups. And for infants and toddlers, parent, grandparent, guardian, and me programs. So think about the intergenerational opportunities here. Next slide, please. So kind of summing this all up, this is something, it's a community asset serving the entire community. Think about having access to a walking track, fitness equipment room, drop-in times for gym use, all sorts of recreational and enrichment programming to take place. Our public health and social services resources can be expanded to serve all ages, and they can actually have private spaces in this location. The outdoor patio that will allow for people to socialize even more. We envision the opportunity to rent spaces out also. There's already a big need for this that REC has to participate with, but there may be opportunities to go even broader than that. To use this facility 24/7 is an exaggeration, but to use it on a very intensive basis. We see this as a place where community events can take place, having a place where right now, if we have a meal or an activity that has more than 60 or 70 people, we can't do it inside the current Pleasant Street Center. This gives us a place to be able to do that. Two other big advantages is, number one, this could be an emergency shelter for the town. It has the right facilities, it has showers, it has an emergency generator, and last but not least, a potential additional voting location for the town. Next slide, please. And here I'm going to turn it over to Jane Wellman, our Assistant Town Manager.
Hey, Jane, you're muted.
Thanks. Thank you. That's fantastic. Good evening, folks. I'm Jane Wellman, the Assistant Town Manager, and it's been my pleasure to work closely with both of these project teams over the past 2 years. Right now, I want to talk briefly about how the design for the Reading Center for Active Living has been shaped by public input. Next slide, please. We created a robust engagement program beginning with the Recalc Committee. Once the designer BH+A was hired in October 2023, we went to great lengths to solicit public input into identifying the needs that we have to serve our 60+ residents, but also to meet the needs of our broader community who regularly utilize the Recreation and Veterans Services divisions. Our project teams issued a survey early on that Mark spoke about that gave us some of the broad strokes to what the community might be interested in seeing for a senior and community center. Staff and volunteers also visited more than 15 other centers, both senior centers and centers for active living, where we learned about success stories, aha moments, and project regrets. For those we didn't visit, important a gym is, and how those that didn't build one always regretted it. How critical a walking track can be to winter wellness in New England, and how important it is to ensure that the program spaces that we design are properly sized and equipped. This project has been on topic at more than 60 public meetings, including the Council on Aging, Select Board, Recalc, Permanent Building Committee, Finance Committee, Conservation, and Recreation. We've held more than 12 additional meetings with town staff and other community organizations and small groups. Through all of these meetings, elected and appointed officials have brought purpose, experience, expertise in a variety of related domains, scrutiny, and professionalism. We have 3 project working groups as well, with members of the Council on Aging that have met weekly or biweekly since we moved into the schematic design phase of the project. And finally, we've held 12 public forums from 2024 till today, inviting the public to interact with the project, tell us their ideas, and give us feedback on the work that's been done so far. Next slide, please. Here you can see that we have utilized every channel available to us to inform the community about the project, from press releases, talking to the media, our website, social media, suggestion boxes, and more. Next slide, please. Together with the community, the Recal project team has worked to incorporate the feedback. Can you hear me? I'm getting a little bit of a Josh.
Hey, Jane, can you turn your camera off? I think that just may help with the bandwidth.
I will do that. There we go. Hopefully we'll keep Zoom for the rest of the night. Okay, so together with the community, the Recal project team has worked to incorporate the feedback from visioning, the meetings, forums, and correspondence we've received into the design. This public engagement has led to spaces that we believe are right-sized to serve Reading well into the future, space that foster both physical and mental wellness by offering indoor fitness, walking, yoga, as well as outdoor spaces in a wooded setting. We have spaces that will host activities to promote mental stimulation, including games, billiards, crafts, a makerspace, and foster lifelong learning. Through the lounge, cafe, and a variety of casual gathering spaces, we support socialization so our clients can gather, relax, and come together to create new friendships, along with a large multi-purpose space that ends those long wait lists we have for large gatherings, celebrations, while also offering rental opportunities. These new thoughtfully designed spaces will preserve privacy and dignity for health, social, and financial service programs we offer. And perhaps more importantly, this new building goes well beyond minimum ADA guidelines to offer a truly inclusive building that meets the needs of all residents and abilities. Finally, by taking a community-centric approach with a 60+ focus, we will be able to expand our program offerings, offering much more than we do now to a broader group over more hours in the day. And with that, I will pass it on to Jenna Wood.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone for being with us tonight. I've been working in the town of Reading for 13 years, and I've been actively involved with the Recal project since 2021, beginning with the second UMass gerontology study. I'm very grateful to the staff and the volunteer boards, stakeholders who have worked extremely hard to get us here, and I'm excited to go over a few design elements that will help us meet the defined needs of the 60+ population and our community as a whole. Right here, you'll see 2 outdoor renderings of the building. There are many shortcomings with the accessibility at the current Pleasant Street Center. Recal will be fully accessible and will feature approximately 90 parking spots in front of the building. There will be a large area in front of the building to allow for safe drop-offs and to accommodate existing town transportation vehicles. There'll be outdoor green space and connection to nature, which was extremely important throughout the process, and it's something that our current center also does not have. At Recal, there will be green spaces on either side of the building, 2 outdoor patios, and a walking path. Next slide, please. Recal will offer a variety of designated program spaces that actually do not exist at the current Pleasant Street Center. The current center, as Kevin mentioned, was built in the late 1800s and has inadequate room for programming and staff currently. We're extremely limited in the amount of programs and the diversity of programs that we can run. And ReCal will include various designated rooms for socializing, games, engineering, arts and crafts, fitness and exercise, sports, billiards, health services, and more. Specifically pictured here, you'll see some of those designated spaces like the designated senior lounge, which will allow for older adults to come in and enjoy informal meetings before and after scheduled programs. The designated game room off of the senior lounge for cards, puzzles, games, and socializing. The multi-purpose room with the commercial kitchen that will allow us to double the amount of people we can serve at larger programs and events, as well as provide means to expand our meal programs in the future. The gym and walking track that will allow our 60+ population and other residents to participate in indoor, passive, and active recreational opportunities at all times during the day. Other communities with the gymnasium and walking track have said that it has dramatically increased their programming opportunities and has turned into the epicenter of social connection for their entire building. A thoughtful design element that you will see in the ReCal building is the flexibility with the shared community spaces like the gymnasium and the multi-purpose room. The gymnasium and the multi-purpose room are on the right side of the building. There is capability to enter into the side door for access to either of those spaces for evening programs and or rentals while limiting access to the other side of the building. Next slide, please. Here you'll see an aerial view of the site. This is already a really great community resource area that features various community uses with athletic fields and the Burbank Ice Arena. You will notice a proposed walking trail that leads into the conservation areas. That is also included in the project cost and has been a collaborative effort with the various staff members and committees involved. Lastly, you'll see the pickleball courts that are part of a separate project, but provide a great active outdoor recreational opportunity, given many residents who play the sport are 60+. Next slide, please. And much like the Killam School group, we visited many of these other centers, senior centers and Cal centers, and got some really valuable information. And the communities listed here all have hybrid building models similar to the proposed ReCal. These centers have noticed dramatic increases in participation. Most recently, Sandwich gave us some data that their increase was over 300% since opening their building. We really encourage you to visit the ReCal website to view those testimonials and some relevant videos specific to each of those towns. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sharon to go over the project costs.
Thank you, Jenna. Next slide, please. So the total cost of this project is $27.9 million, and that includes all project costs and contingencies. Again, we looked at the different options for terms, and we're leaning towards a 15-year loan for this borrowing at 3%. It's a 29.78 cents per 100,000. Our average home, as we mentioned, is 890,000. So you would just multiply by 8.9. We mentioned again the excluded debt that's falling off between Reading Memorial High School, Wood End, and the library. The high school and Wood End, $27.15 per 100,000 was the savings that you would have seen in your fiscal 25 tax bill. And the last debt payment is this year for the library, $16.31 per 100,000 is the savings you'll see come fiscal 26 related to that project. Next slide, please. So the average 890,000 home would pay an additional $265.04 per year, or $22.08 per month. And obviously there's two projects here, but both are going to mention the excluded debt that's falling off over 25 and 26. And so this would actually, if this was the only project that we were looking at, you'd be looking at a net impact of excluded debt of a decrease of $121.76 if ReCal was the only project we were thinking about. Next slide, please. This slide is just to show you kind of some examples of what you're looking at. So Killam is $80.50 per year per 100,000, and then the Killam is 29.78, but we rounded up to 29.8 per 100,000. And then if you look at the debt that's being retired, that's $43.50 per year per 100,000. So the combined impact, if you're looking at excluded debt, is $66.80 per 100,000. So you could take that impact, that 66.8, and multiply it by whatever the home value you have. So if it's 600,000, you would take that and multiply it by 6, and you'd get about $400 a year net impact. You know, with the excluded debt considered, 800,000 would be a $534 net impact, or $45 a month. A $1 million home would have a net impact of $669, or $56 a month. Now, the other point that I failed to make earlier, that is a very important point, is that this would not hit your bill all at once. We would be borrowing as the projects are in need of cash flow. And so you could see this spreading over the course of several years. I would suspect 2026 would have minimal impact. You would actually probably see the library fall off before you'd even start to see any impact of this borrowing, because we're asking for a debt exclusion in May. You know, I'd have to borrow by June to actually have a principal payment. So chances are good if you saw anything in 2026, it would be an interest payment on a band, possibly. Most of it would start to come on in fiscal 27 and 28, potentially 29, depending on how many tranches we decide on borrowing on each one of the projects and how the cash flow looks. So that's important to note, that this is more gradual than one would expect. It's not like it will hit your bill all in one year. It will be probably over a couple of years. The other thing that's important to note is that the assessor's office does offer some tax help for those who might be in need of such things. So I would encourage people to visit the assessor's office to see if there's anything that you qualify for that would help you with these types of things, with taxes related to these projects. So the $800,000 home, $134 tax increase in 2026, full amount of increase hits 2029. So they're basically giving you an example that if we were to do a small like borrowing, which I don't think we'll have it done by fiscal 26, you would see such a small increase. It would just really be starting to spread between 27, 28, and 29 possibly. So that does help make it more affordable and more palatable for most to see it come on over the course of a few years. Next slide, please. Again, we would look at our calculator and remind you to utilize that to take a look at what your value is, how it impacts your home, how affordable all of this is in your budget, and remind you to seek tax assistance from our assessing office to see what you qualify for if these projects sound like they could be problematic for you in affordability. See what you qualify for, because we do have a senior tax relief program here in Reading, which most people I would think know about, but some may not. It's very important if you qualify for those sorts of exemptions that you apply at the assessing office. Next slide. I'm going to pass it on to Matt, who will tell you about what will happen with the old senior center.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. A question I get a lot is what's going to happen to the old Pleasant Street Center? And with good reason. It's been around, as we said earlier, since 1850. It's our oldest building, and so people care about it quite a bit. We want to try to generate as much revenue as possible from it to offset the cost of the recalc center, and so that's one of our goals. So just a few quick facts. You see the finished area of the current Pleasant Street Center. It's currently assessed at about $870,000, but we feel it's worth a lot more than that. So we've commissioned a commercial appraisal to be done, and that's being conducted currently. And we will have the results of that before town meeting, because I'm sure town meeting members would be very interested in how much the building is actually worth with a full commercial appraisal done. Here's a little bit about the zoning. It is in a multifamily A40 zone, but the square footage falls short of what would really be needed to put multifamily housing in there. And it's also, as people probably know, on the Massachusetts Historic Registry. So that is of local importance and could be a hurdle to future development potential. Next slide, please. So we are looking for a new life for the Pleasant Street Center, and there's several options, and we've met as groups and in public forums to talk about what the options could be. We could keep it for future town use. We could lease it to a for-profit or a nonprofit business. We could sell the property. There's also an opportunity to gift it to the Housing Authority for affordable housing. So there's a lot of different avenues we can pursue for the Pleasant Street Center. So next slide. So if we looked at potential uses, really, the sky's the limit. We think that if we were entered into a commercial lease, and you can see the two circles, the one on the left, it'd be $20 per square foot, maybe a little higher than that, and could generate anywhere from $85,000 to $100,000 a year if we were to rent out the space. And it could be a coffee shop, a grocery place, a food pantry, restaurant. Art and cultural space is something we're lacking in Reading, and there's been a lot of talk about that. Could be a school space, preschool, and whatnot. We could also keep it for town use, and there's plenty of uses the town could have. We're always looking for additional meeting space. We actually use the current building as meeting space. Office space is at a premium. We're pretty cramped in town hall. Storage is at a premium, especially for election equipment and whatnot. And we could also use it for further educational space. Next slide, please. So as we looked at different ways and different things that they've done in towns to maximize their current buildings that are similar to Pleasant Street Center, or to highlight certain nonprofit businesses in town, we looked at a few examples. One is right next door in Reading, Reading and Wakefield, the Inspire Cafe, sponsored by the Boys and Girls Club. There's also one, Breaking Grounds Cafe in Peabody. Those are potential nonprofit uses, but could still generate income for the Pleasant Street Center and for the town. Next slide, please. And these are some buildings that we looked at that could really be a good potential use for repurposing the Pleasant Street Center. If you look at the building on the left, the one in Natick, it actually looks, to me and several others, a lot like our current Pleasant Street Center. It's a performing arts venue. They have screenings there, community events. It could be used for education. And then there's also the place I've been many times, the Firehouse Center for the Arts in Newburyport. And that's a theater, a music venue, gallery, education, and they also have a restaurant right built in. So there's a multi-use in that area. So there's a lot of potential. And like I said, the commercial appraisal will dictate a lot about the current value of the Pleasant Street Center. It's something we're already starting to look at, though, as to what we might do with it next. So thank you. Next slide. So I think right now we would go to questions and answers. So that concludes both presentations. I think everybody did a great job tonight presenting both projects. And so I think I would turn it back over to Josh as he could see the full room and we could get to people's questions. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. I just want to say thank you to everyone who presented, and thank you to everyone who's already asked questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Tom and Sean, I believe, and Mike have already answered some of those questions, but we do have some typed out questions in our Q&A. We'll get through the typed ones, and then if anyone raises their hand, I'll unmute you, and then we'll get to your question once we read all these other ones. So the first question, Sean, would you like to read it, or I'm not sure how this is going to work?
Yeah, I can maybe just summarize it before I respond. Okay. Thanks, Josh. So Rebecca, I think it's a great question. You know, is there an opportunity to scale back the Killam project, including by not moving Rise, and a concern about an expected operating override vote that may come over the next few years? And does it make it less likely that operating override would pass if these two projects are approved? And also a question about our enrollment trends and our expectations there. So really fair questions. Let me start with the one about scaling back the project and Rise in particular. I think there are two angles to this I would take. One is strategically, why did we choose to include Rise in this, in the project as it stands? And then the second is a very sort of practical limitation to choosing to scale it back. Strategically, I think the reason that we decided to include Rise had several pieces to it. One is you know, as Dr. Milczewski alluded to earlier, we're actually very close to a tipping point where the number of students with special needs that we have to accommodate on the RISE program would require us to expand the number of classrooms that we have to service those students. So for those that don't know, the RISE program has to be structured such that the number of students with special needs we have in a classroom, we have to have that many tuition paying students plus one in each of those classrooms. And so, you know, there's a ratio that we have to maintain there. And so as we potentially see more students come in the district with special needs, you know, in those younger ages, we could reach a tipping point where we have to expand even independent of the demand for the tuition paying slots that we currently have. So that's one angle on it. The second angle on it strategically is Dr. Milczewski alluded to some of the things that are freed up for us programmatically in the district if we're able to consolidate and free up classroom space at the high school, at Woodend, you know, and so forth. There are a number of things that we've talked about at the school committee that we will, you know, certainly go deeper on over the next few years that are actually potentially revenue generating options for us, you know, that we often refer to as invest to save type options. And so things that come to mind are, you know, the innovation pathways work that we're doing at the high school. There are grant opportunities that will become available to us as we sort of expand our footprint and our own investment in our innovation pathways. So that's one example. Another example is special education programming. We've been working really hard to improve our special education programming so that we have fewer students who need to go to very expensive out-of-district placements. And we could even get to a place where we have, you know, we're attracting more students to place into the district from other communities, which would be a revenue generating opportunity for us as well. So when we found out that the MSBA was willing to participate and help fund this expansion and consolidation of RISE, when you look at those needs and those opportunities for us from a revenue generation perspective and a programmatic perspective, we just thought it would be short-sighted not to include it and take advantage of the potential for state funding here. The enrollment question, you know, about enrollment going in cycles, and are we sort of sure that our enrollment trends support the need for five elementary schools? You know, we'd have to have a pretty rapid downward acceleration of our trends to get to a place that over a reasonable time period where we could consolidate to 4. And we really believe we're actually going to go the other direction. We did a detailed demographic study several years ago, and the demographic study goes deeper than a lot of other sort of enrollment forecasting methodologies. And one of the big dynamics that they found in that demographic study was that with the aging population that we have in town, which is, you know, of course, part of why we're talking about the recal, but with the aging population that we have in town, we're also likely to see an acceleration in housing turnover. And when you have housing turnover from an older generation whose kids have been, you know, out of the home for decades to the people that, you know, often, you know, move into, renovate, you know, flip those homes, that forecast an acceleration or a growth in our enrollment that we expect to start, you know, really over the next few years as we start to see those turnovers pick up. So can we say we're sure that enrollment trends, you know, are going to be on the upswing or continue to be on the upswing? No, but all the data that we have suggests that they should. And I'll just highlight as well that as part of the MSBA process, we had to go through those projections in some detail with the MSBA. And they concurred with our assessment that the enrollment trends are likely to, you know, sort of expand the stress on our buildings. And the last piece I'll just say about this is it's not just about enrollment. I alluded to earlier sort of the space constraints and the expectations of a modern school building when we think about the diverse needs of students. It's that growth in needs and that growth in space requirements that's driving a lot of this as much as it is just a sort of pure enrollment trend. So great question. Thank you for asking it. Second question from Karen was, hello, thanks for doing this. Are the state funds guaranteed at this point? Pending the town votes, you know, are favorable, both at town meeting and the debt exclusion vote on May 13th. The state funds are guaranteed at this point. So as I mentioned, the MSBA is an independent agency. It's not sort of subject to the typical kind of appropriation of state government. It has a dedicated revenue stream. And so there's no realistic path, you know, over the next few weeks for that funding to fall through, presuming the town goes through with our part of it.
Thank you for answering those. I think the next question is from Rebecca again. Mark, would you like to go and take that away?
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for the question, Rebecca. The question is, would it be possible to scale this back and to find a downtown location for it? If this is truly going to be for the community, I feel it should be centrally located. Thanks for bringing that up. We looked exhaustively at all different kinds of locations. Some of you may remember that about 2.5 years ago, we entered into negotiations to get the space that now is the dollar store that used to be Walgreens for many years ago, which would have been a nice central location, giving us a little bit of size. Unfortunately, we weren't able to bring that to fruition. We couldn't find any spaces that would allow us to give us the additional space, which is really what's lacking right now. We did look at what could we do to change the Pleasant Street Center. We in fact looked at refurbishing that building completely and allowing for expansion of space to accomplish what we're looking for. And it came out to be similar, in fact, actually higher cost to do that, as opposed to looking at the other locations we were talking about. When each of the various groups that I mentioned took a look at these locations, the Center for Active Living Committee, the Council on Aging, the Permanent Building Committee, the Select Board, part of the criteria we looked at were understanding trade-offs, because there's nothing that's perfect. And we would have loved to find a downtown location to do it, but the trade-offs for that were worse than what we found basically over at Simon's Way. Another thing that I think weighed for a number of the groups was that many, if not most of the people today that come to the Pleasant Street Center get there by car. They're traveling by car to get there. And if we look even at the survey that we did, the 1,472 folks that responded to the survey, although there was a preference for it to be downtown, there were a lot of folks who were fine with it being in other locations. We also know from other communities that set up these kinds of centers, and Jenna alluded to these also, the participation rates of seniors from age 60 plus goes up dramatically with the opening of these centers. So we feel very confident that we'll meet the needs of the community very nicely in this location that's been recommended down in Simon's Way.
Thank you, Mark. The next question is from Attain. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I'm just going to read it, and any of the panelists, please feel free to answer. So the question is, when you say cooking classes and maker spaces, these are things that should be accessible, close by, in a newly renovated Killam. Have we considered how we use space, time, and buildings efficiently? I fully support both of these and want to build for the future.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think of course, in the school and in ReCal, you'll see some similar programming spaces. However, the big difference is that during the day, our 60 plus population cannot access any of those school spaces. A lot of the school spaces that we use in recreation right now in the elementary schools, we're not able to get in there until after 6 p.m. and then it's just limited to the weekend time. So our 60 plus population, they do want an evening program and weekend programming, but a majority of our 60 plus population right now comes to the current center during the day and have indicated that they want cooking classes and they want opportunities in maker spaces and engineering. So they wouldn't be allowed in the schools during the day. So we're offering the opportunity in this center. And if anyone wants to add any more color to that.
I think I would have just one thing, Jenna, if I could, which is that there is an opportunity for more meal activities to take place in the new center for the 60 plus community, which would be daytime focused. And that obviously is not available during school hours also. The cooking classes, I think, Attain, that you talked about also, these are just kind of examples of things that could happen. But again, all times of day, weekends, whenever, for possibilities, depending on volunteers that want to offer these things, or if we're going to have more organized programming.
Thank you both. We're going to move on to the next question. I think, Pat, you wanted to answer this one.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I guess I'll read the question. How accurate can your cost figures be in light of the unpredictable behavior of the federal government and international economy? Are there contingencies for unpredictable cost increases? To answer that, first, I'll give you a little background on how we came up with the cost estimates and the budgets that we're at today. So on both projects, when we got through the schematic design phase, which is where we're at now, which we basically have the shape and size of the building, the number of rooms, the layout of the rooms. Each project was estimated by two separate independent cost estimators, one hired by the architect and one hired by the OPM. When they completed their cost estimates, obviously they didn't came in with different numbers. And then they sit down in a room and basically go line by line and reconcile those estimates. You know, why were you this much here? And they come to an agreement on a budget. In addition to the budget on the hard costs, there are soft costs and there are multiple contingencies in the estimates and in the budgets. There is a contingency for escalation in both projects that I think is about 4 or 5%. Our current, I know that we're in a certain financial, fiscal time, but our current inflation is like 2 to 3%, and we've got 4 or 5% in our current estimates. So we've got a little room to run. And one of the things to consider, there's a lot of things that can happen in a worst case scenario where we do have high escalation as well as high interest rates. That's sort of the worst case scenario. There does become a silver lining, because in an event like that, high interest rates will lead to continued less construction work in the private sector. And when we go to bid next year, we'll see more competition, more contractors in the public sector, which will help pull costs down a little bit and offset some of those potential increases. Bottom line is, we don't know what the future holds. We think we have appropriate contingencies. But the most important thing is that as we go through the process, as we finish design on both of these projects, we'll be watching costs closely along the way. We'll go through a design development phase where we further the design. And on both projects at that point, we'll go back out for the same rigorous cost estimating process, and we'll have a chance to see where we're at with costs. On Killam, we'll do that again at 60% construction documents. And then at 90%, when we're 90% complete with the design, we'll do it again. On the Recal project, the design is going to be a little bit shorter. So we'll just do the design development estimate and then again at 90%. So on Killam, we'll have 3 chances to look at the costs again. On Recal, we'll have 2 chances. And in each scenario, we'll be including different alternates, both to add in or take out of the projects to again, rescope and value engineer the projects to the correct budget. Also, these are public projects, so more so with Killam and the MSBA projects, but we'll be able to see similar projects bid throughout the course of the next 12 months. We'll be able to see, similar 100,000 square foot elementary schools bidding throughout the next 12 to 15 months. And that can provide a good gauge for us if we see costs spiking and we know we need to, look at things. And again, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, as a group, we're committed to meeting the budget and value engineering and rescoping the projects as needed, if needed, to meet the budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great answer. We'll move on to the next one. Mark, your question.
Thanks, Josh. So the question is, can the project be accomplished in phases with a focus on just the senior portion first? Also, what, if anything, has been considered in increasing the use of library spaces for senior activities? So let me kind of take the first shot at that. This project is focused on the senior community. A number of the studies that we looked at talked about having both more space in general, but also have the ability for more physical activities. And the notion of the gym, the walking track are designed specifically and oriented specifically around that also. There aren't really any other spaces that are usable to accomplish those purposes. Can we use the library spaces more for senior activities? So it is used for a number of activities today. One of the things that we also looked at was, can you have programs in lots of different spaces and have to have people figure out where to go for their activities, which generates a lot of confusion and doesn't allow for that that main social aspect of what the real need is that we've identified. These kinds of centers have been they've been around for a while, but they're becoming more and more popular, and there's a lot more activity going on. And it's accomplishing its goal of getting more people participating. That's really what we're trying to accomplish. And just to get back to the first part of the question, even if you tried to scale back a piece of the project, if you took out $3-4 million, whatever, two things happen. One is that you might take out a little bit of the cost, maybe it's $30 of the increase, and then you get yourself into a situation of having to pay much more when you want to do it later. And you've heard kind of how deliberate everyone was in figuring out what's the right thing to do and how to do it. That's what this is. And then you heard from Sharon trying to figure out what's the right way to pay for it. And what's the best way to pay for it. And the notion here of kind of a shorter 15-year term on this project, I guess, is what's currently under consideration. We don't want to pay a lot of interest. We're working very hard in this time frame to do the most efficient thing we can with costs. And that's kind of where we came up here.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to say for the panel, when you press that you're going to speak for the question, can you please press done as well so that it'll go to the answered tab so everyone can read those questions. Next question for the Recal Center. So are there senior spaces dedicated? Which means not available to non-seniors? What space is considered the emergency shelter? What will be the open hours for this facility? What additional staffing needs are required to enable additional usage of the space?
I can take that. We are actually currently working on an operational plan that will cover all of these aspects. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you some concrete detail on every single space inside the building right now, but I don't want to misspeak. But yes, there will be some designated senior spaces. And that will happen. What space is considered an emergency shelter? The whole building, actually. We even have a space inside of the building that will be specific for animals. So our arts and crafts room would be designated for animals in case someone needed to bring their animals there. The hours of the facility, we are also working out those details, but they're available in our FAQ section on our website. And additional staffing we're also working toward. We do know that we'll probably need some more custodial staff, but we're confident that with our existing 10 full-time staff members that we have, as well as our part-time staff, that we will be able to staff this building with just the staff that we have during the hours of operating. And that includes the weekend. So we are really being thoughtful in this plan, and we hope to bring a more comprehensive plan with details at town meeting. And I think the next question is the same about the operational costs. So yeah, we're working on that as well as Killam. And yeah, it looks like the same question multiple times, if I'm not mistaken, right, Josh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, it looks very similar. There were a few more questions, and I believe some of our panelists did say they were going to answer them. I think we're going to go with Jacob McDonald's question first. And I can read it real quick. What is the driving cost of the Killam School project? The price per square foot is close to 900 square foot, where similar projects with MSBA funding were completed from 600 to 700. Are there more economical construction techniques, mechanical systems? What could we be using?
Well, I'll thank you, Josh. I'll take that question. So first of all, when you see construction costs and you read about maybe a project that was completed for $600 a square foot, you need to make sure that's the full cost and not just the hard cost that includes all the soft costs. As far as Killam, we're looking at everything. We want to build a fiscally responsible, sustainable, quality building that's going to last a long time. The things that we're doing are right in line with the scope and size and other MSBA projects. Look, I'm looking at the MSBA website now, and Killam is kind of right in the middle of the projects that are scheduled to bid out in 2026. Killam is $876 per square foot, and it's in a cohort of other schools that on the low end are $821 a square foot, and on the high end are up around $1,000 a square foot. So we're right in the middle, actually kind of at the top of the lowest third, somewhere around the 33rd percentile, I would say, of cost, of projected cost for MSBA schools in that time period. And we're looking to build a fiscally responsible school that's responsibly sustainable and is going to last a long time for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next question, we're going to go, maybe Sharon, what other funding mechanisms were explored for the Recal Center? Is all of the funding coming from debt, or will there be fundraising activities, donations?
So maybe I could start with that one, and maybe Sharon, you can join
Okay.
me as well. So all funding mechanisms are and have been explored. We spent a good amount of time talking with our state delegation to see if there might be some funding sources that would come from that. We've been informed that no, that's not a possibility. We were directed to try for some federal earmark money. It seems that right now is probably not the right time for that to be taking place, unfortunately. We've looked a little bit at some larger foundations, but I think that there certainly are going to be some opportunities to try to find other funds, other outside funds. And maybe Sharon, you could talk a little bit about inside funds.
So yes, for the Recal project, there isn't any grants or outside funds that have been identified currently. Of course, we will continue to look. The other internal sources that we had talked about is the potential use of free cash, but right now I don't think it's a good choice for us to make, given that we're using so much free cash in our operating budget. So, but we will entertain any kind of grants that we can, as we're going through this process, that we can apply for. Just nothing has come to fruition in that regard. Obviously, the Killam project comes with an MSBA grant, but we haven't had any luck getting anything grant related for this project.
I would imagine, if I could just add, we'd be very open to fundraising activities, donations, and things like that as time goes on.
Yes, absolutely.
If I could just add on the Recal project, there have been some discussions with RMLD on some potential grants that might affect this project, but we're still in the early stages of discussions on those. So we don't have the numbers as of this point, but that will help. It's not going to be anything like the MSBA grants that are, substantial for the project, but every little bit does help to lower the cost. So we'll be pursuing those.
Sorry, last add, we're now members of the Green Communities program, and it may be that there's an opportunity to apply for a grant through them. Perhaps for both buildings, perhaps for either building. I'm not sure of any specifics on that, but it should be an asset, or excuse me, an opportunity for the community to apply for some of those grants.
Thank you all. I think Pat, you're going to take the next question.
If I can unmute myself, I will. Yeah, unless someone else wants to take it. But the question was about the Inflation Reduction Act credits that may be available for the Killam School and why those aren't included in the presentation. There are significant Inflation Reduction Act credits potentially available for the Killam School. The design includes a half geothermal well system, as well as rooftop solar panels, which will, as things stand today, that will qualify it for significant credits. Those credits aren't locked in at this time, like the MSBA credit contributions are. So we didn't want to present it in full transparency to the community. We did want to present it as something that a building that's going to be a lower cost than it actually is. But there are definitely some significant incentives available that we will pursue in the event that the projects pass town vote in the town meeting vote. We're going to aggressively pursue any credits and grants available for both projects.
Yeah, Pat, if I can just add to that, maybe just a little bit. The other part of that is that the credits and grants come in after the project is fully complete and after the building is built. So while they may help offset costs down the line, they're not affecting the initial costs up front. So those costs up front are established already. The grants could certainly help us with the borrowing later down the line, but that has to be determined, as Pat said, much later down the line.
Thank you. I think the next question, Mark, you wanted to answer about the gym and walking track. You are muted. Hey, Mark, you're muted still.
Thank you. It sounded good to me, but I guess it didn't broadcast. So let's try that again. When you spoke to other senior centers that said they wished they put in a gym and walking track, et cetera, what was the reason they gave for not doing so? Money? So the question we asked them was really to understand what had they learned from the centers that they built, and if they had to do it again, what would they do differently? And that's where oftentimes the answer came back was, we wish that we had done a gym, that was really something that was needed and they hadn't done. Did not ask them why not. I'm sure money, certainly played into that. But this was more kind of understanding the needs and trying to respond to that.
Jenna, Ms. Jane, Jenna may also have some feedback here. We've talked a lot about this particular question. Jenna?
Hi. Yeah, no, I think Mark covered it, and I think why they regret it is that they keep getting feedback from their participants as well that they wish that they had it. So I think that the way that senior centers and these Cal centers are working is they're envisioning a different future now when they're building them. So that's why you're seeing a lot more recal. Aging is a lot different. And people who are building the senior centers take a step back and they're like, oh, we really wish we had this. North Andover, most recently, we visited there a couple months ago, and they're like, oh, you're proposing a gym and a walking track? So jealous. They only had a small little footprint of land that they could work with, and they're already busting at the seams. And that's what you notice. You go to these senior centers that are being built, and it's just not efficient enough for even now, and not for the future, 50 years into the future, which is what we're building for.
Yeah, I think, Jenna, that's part of the key here also, is that we are trying to build toward the future. We know that the 60+ community is growing, and we're trying to, how do we serve the needs for the community for the next 50 years, or as far along that line as we possibly can? And we're trying to think ahead of the present. One of the pressures that was on us a lot was, don't build something that's too small, because as the population grows, what are you going to do next? You don't want to kind of be outside of your center by the time it gets built. That would be a mistake. So that's part of the planning that went into this as well.
Thank you for that. I think the next question was from Jacob as well. I'm not sure who wants to answer this. I'm just going to read it real quick. For Killam, I think we should be more concerned about the 50% difference in construction costs between the projects current in bidding and contracts versus projects in planning. Do we expect the bids to be substantially lower than our projections? And if so, are we over budgeting for this?
Well, I'll take a crack at this, and I'll let Mike Carroll jump in and correct anything I say that's not accurate. But Jacob's looking at the same. I think he's looking at the same website as I am right now, and what's going on in the marketplace right now is that kind of what I mentioned before. We have high interest rates. In the private construction market is pretty slow. In the public construction market is seeing a lot of competition. If we could put these projects out to bid today, we should put them out to bid today. But we can't, because we got to go through a process. We need a town meeting vote, a town vote, and we need to do a design. But we are cautiously optimistic that the cost estimates, that this trend will continue, and that the cost estimates will be that they're, let's say, more than sufficient. But the flip side of that is as another person noted earlier, we are in a volatile time. Tariffs, I don't want to get into a debate over what is going to happen with tariffs. tariffs will impact the cost of our buildings. But as noted, if you look at the MSBA website, the host of school projects like ours, and again, we're in of the projects in our time period, we're at 800, I think it's $871 a square foot all in. You see $876 a square foot. I would say, there are more projects more expensive than Killam than there are less expensive than Killam. If we're fortunate enough that this trend continues, then the project could come in under budget. But what you're seeing right now is a good bidding environment that's been going on for about the last 6 to 12 months in the public sector. I don't know, Mike, if you want to provide some color on that as well.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Pat. So I would say in general, I think part of what you had said earlier as well is that we're going to continue to evaluate these as we move forward. We have estimators that are actually very involved with public bidding as well as the public school market. So they're going to be keeping an eye on that, and we're going to be continuing to adjust ours. I will tell you, I'm working with another school district that just bid a job recently, and for all intents and purposes, their cost per square foot is the same as ours. They did see a very favorable bid, and we're hoping that that trend continues and helps us down the line. But to your point, with all the uncertainty out there, it would be maybe a little irresponsible to do that this early in the process. So we're continuing to manage that project. I will let everybody know, if we looked at the budget for the Killam School about a year ago, it was actually a bit more than this. And through diligence and through proper design and working on the HVAC system, things like that, we've already been able to reduce that down to a point where we feel comfortable moving forward with the number that we're at right now. And we're going to continue to evaluate that. This is the upper limit. We will be making sure that we come in on time and under budget.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Pat. Our next question is about the survey for ReCal. And Mark, do you want me to go to the slide? Would that help you possibly?
I actually found the slide.
Oh, cool.
So I can answer. So the question, sorry, I lost it here. When ReCal surveyed residents asking how much people would be willing to pay / increase their taxes, what was the preferred amount, and does this estimate fit into that number? So when we did the survey, which I think was 2022, if I'm not mistaken, we did ask a question about the tax increase you'd support, and we asked for a senior center, for a community center. So on the all ages community center, the answer for people that said I would spend $100 to $200 or more per year was 60% answered that way. Of those who said I would spend $200 or more per year, that was 30%. So I would say that two things. One, obviously things are much more expensive now than they were back in 2022. And second is that one of the decisions the town had to make, and again, Sharon was talking about this before, was over what term do you want to finance the project? What makes the most sense in terms of how to do it? So could we spend less per year, have a lower payment by taking it out more than 15 years? We could. Same thing with, just like a mortgage. A 30-year mortgage has a lower payment per period versus a 15-year mortgage, but you pay a lot more in interest. And Sharon, sorry, I'm probably stepping on your toes, and I apologize. Feel free to bail me out whenever you want. But the notion here was, what's the most responsible way to pay for it? So I would suggest to you that the number of people that responded strongly to the All Ages Community Center with a willingness to pay a substantial amount of money, and accounting for inflation, that I think this was the reason why this still makes sense. Sharon, do you want to add or subtract anything?
Yeah, we paid a lot of attention to what the interest was going to be on each project and trying to minimize that interest and still keep it in an affordable range. And that's how we landed where we are. We could change our mind if the market changes by the time we go out to bond, and we have the better interest rate available for a longer term. But right now, the most advantageous from what we can see is a 20-year for Killam and 15 for the ReCal project, but the market could change. And so that's why we're saying we're leaning in that direction. That's worst case scenario in terms of the shortest term. But I do think that we will, accept feedback from people. If people are saying, geez, I'd really like to see that number lower, that's going to play into what we do when it comes time to borrow.
All right, our next question, I'm just going to read it out loud. Anyone in the panel, feel free to answer. So this might not be the best, sorry, this might not be a time to plan for 50 years in the future, given the current environment. What, if any, are anticipated expenses and needs for the town as opposed to wants? It seems important to anticipate other expenses coming down the line. Example, if there's other school updates in the future.
I could try to answer some of that in terms of anticipated expenses coming up. One will be our trash pickup contract. That is coming, that's expiring soon, within the next year or so. And we had a very advantageous contract. We anticipate that some of those costs will go up in terms of rubbish removal. People probably have seen, they've started to see their new toters being delivered, which will help with that issue. But that's something that is on the horizon that, that will affect the budget overall. In terms of buildings, that's something we're going to have to take a look at. I think Pat laid it out pretty well in terms of the years of all those buildings and what they were, when they were built and when they were renovated. We don't have a fixed yet on which one might need renovation next, but it's something that facilities department and Sharon and I through capital keep a pretty good watch on. So anybody else could add to that too.
So I will say that we are looking to do a facilities master plan to help us kind of prioritize what might need to be done on some of the buildings that we have and kind of add that to our capital plan in terms of priorities. But right now, I think these two buildings were the highest priority, which is why you're seeing them now. As far as expenses, nothing is standing out to me for any specific building, but that's why the facilities master plan is going to be done, just to see, and plan out for the future. What's the next building that's going to need renovation or addressing in any way? Those are the big things. Capital is one of the bigger things and the harder things to get done inside the levy because we're kind of restricted in our income. Prop 2.5 restricts you to the largest source of our revenue at 2.5%. It's really hard to afford some of these larger projects inside that. So that master plan will help us identify what's the next highest, need within our other buildings, because they are aging and there are going to be needs. But I don't think anything as big as what we're looking at here with these two projects.
Thank you both. And then follow-up question regarding the ReCal staffing. So do we envision this building being open until 9 p.m. daily without an on-site staff person? Would a group of middle school or high school students be there playing basketball with no administrator? Do we plan to have a devoted full-time custodial staff person that would add to the current custodial staff level? Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, I can answer that question. Thanks for the question, Karen. We do plan on having someone in the building at all times when members of the public are in there. We do assume that there will be a full-time custodial staff member that will be there. We are still working on the number. If we need 2 or 1 or 1 in a part-time, we're researching with other Cal centers around and working on our operations plan with facilities. So we're having some really great open and transparent conversations. There's also another way that we function right now in our buildings is we do have just a staff member who is in there. So a program supervisor, and that program supervisor could be offset by the recreation revolving fund. So there wouldn't be a cost implication as far as an additional cost to a staff member in that way. So there's a couple different ways that we can look at it, but certainly there will always be a staff member in the building when members of the public are in there.
If we could just be even very specific on this one. So there won't be an opportunity for a group of middle or high school kids to be there playing basketball with no administrator in the building. No.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so as of right now, we have, thank you, you're welcome. Okay, as of right now, we have no more Q&A questions that were typed out. I just want to give like 30 seconds. Does anyone want to raise their hand for a question? If not, I think I can just say thank you for everyone coming tonight. As a reminder, this is being recorded. I will upload it to our town website, to the Killam website, the ReCal site tomorrow morning with the presentation, with all the handouts. I don't know, does anyone else have any closing thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I would just like to thank everybody for coming out tonight via Zoom. I was looking in the participants and we did have a very good crowd, which I was happy to see. I hope everybody got their questions answered tonight, but if not, we're still available right up until the town meeting vote on this to answer any further questions people will have. There's a lot of resources on the town website with the QR code. So there's a lot of information out there. I hope people can avail themselves of that and still direct questions to us if they still have thoughts on either project. But thank you all for coming tonight. And I think we had a good 2-hour webinar, and it was a great follow-up from our April 2nd live event.
And yeah, before we end, Sean, you had your hand up, and then we'll get to Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Two things. I'll just echo, Matt's thanks to everyone for attending tonight and asking some great questions. I did remember that I forgot one thing I wanted to say in response to one of Rebecca's questions earlier. She was asking about the opportunity to scale down, maybe, by removing RISE from the Killam project. And I said there were strategic reasons why we chose to include it, but also a very practical reason. The MSBA is set on April 30th to approve the project scope for Killam at their board meeting. A change of that magnitude, significantly removing space would essentially, put us back to square one in terms of the MSBA process. So as a practical matter, it's not feasible sort of in the current funding cycle for us to, to do that kind of scaling back at this point and still stay on our timeline.
If I might just chime in for a sec again, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Matt, thanks Sean for your comments as well. What Matt mentioned before, two aspects. One is if you do have questions, please reach out. There are people to answer all those questions. And the second is that, and Matt, you said this very eloquently, the belief is that these are the two highest priority projects in the community, and that's why they're coming forward to you. And we appreciate your wanting to get more information about them and are available to provide that information. So we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think that would conclude the program tonight. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.